What's the deal, Panther fans? Boy Tony Dunn here. C3 BeatCheck in the house. We got a cool one for you. Some cool stuff. We're going live a little bit early before our guest gets here. Joe DeLeone from the Bleav production company. Basically, scout expert, insider, interested in the draft. So we'll be talking about quarterback prospects, offensive line, linebackers, and who would want to trade with the Carolina Panthers. As usual, I'm joined by my buddy, my pal, my co-host, Cody Lashney. Welcome back. Another night in the lab.
Yeah, Tony Dunn, we're back at it once again with another edition of the BeatCheck, where we check the beat and see what's going on in Panther Nation and just, in general around the NFL. This is fun. Happy to be here doing it with you. We have a great guest tonight. We got some great people already in the chat room. Drew, we got Chase Ebert, Mike Todd 8, Zach Simmons, and I saw young Connor Jordan in there a little while ago too. Tony, it's going to be a fun one, man. Ready to jump into it.
We went live just because some kind of news or at least topics of interest are coming out of the interviews at the Combine today. Just a kind of heads up of what's going down is it looks like the Carolina Panthers are not going to be bringing back Hassan Reddick. Targeting potentially a quarterback at 6, or at least I tell you this, the biggest thing that stood out to me is the zero confidence in I already forgot his name, Sam Darnold. It's just like, sorry, we moving on. There is not even a competition word. Not even a competition word in this.
Yeah, they did say that the quarterback position is open. They even mentioned, Cam Newton at one point in time. They didn't put the Deshaun Watson rumors to bed. He doubled down to making the point that offensive line and quarterback are the two biggest areas of need for the Carolina Panthers. But I think the biggest bombshell that we learned is that the Carolina Panthers are going to let Hassan Reddick test the free agent waters and see what kind of money he can get. And Tony, I, like many in Panther Nation, pretty much have come to the same conclusion. Kiss Hassan Reddick goodbye. Doesn't look like he's going to be a Carolina Panther anymore. I think some team that's looking to contend is going to pay him a nice bag, a nice chunk of change to come and be a 10+ year sack artist for them. And that's unfortunate. Maybe it gives a little more context to that Frankie Louvu signing earlier in the year. Maybe they're hoping that he's their own discount version of Hassan Reddick, but it's tough to see that amount of production potentially walk out the door, Tony. Hey, you're muted.
A lot of defending the Ian Thomas contract, or at least explaining the logic behind it. Seems like a Ben McAdoo kind of thing. At least that's what he's talking about. We'll circle back to these topics that are breaking.
Sure.
From the Combine, the rumors, the kind of positions that they're taking. It is interesting that Scott Fitter is the mouthpiece of the organization while Matt Rule is in hiding. I got to tell you, I think they know that this is a done deal. They're just going to usher him out gracefully as a lame duck coach. Quack, quack. But let's go ahead and get into the night's show. Cody, bring in our guest, Joe DeLeone. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
You were close, DeLeon. You're the first person in my Combine cycle of guest appearances that got it wrong, so I'm sorry to say that.
Oh, man.
You're just off, though. You guys are good. You're good.
We were wondering right before the show, DeLeon.
I know. We knew it had some ethnicity to it. What's the origins of that?
It's Italian. I've had much worse mispronunciation, so I'm just giving you guys a hard time.
I should be better. I am Italian. My mother's maiden name is Pansini, but I live in North Carolina, dude. Paisan, welcome to the show, Paisan.
Right.
Joe, now the Bleav network, or what do we call it now? Bleav production company?
Just Bleav, because we're
Bleav.
Braun, the man in charge, is coined the term omni-channel. I still don't really know what that means, but we put out content, not just podcast, video, social. Everything's expanding as we're starting to open things up here at Bleav.
I love it. You're a host of Bleav in FCS football and NFL draft prospects former long snapper.
Yes, that's
We've got-
correct.
We've got so many questions about was it Thomas Fletcher, Cody, who got signed by the Panthers in the 7th?
Yeah. And do we re-sign JJ Jansen?
I know. It's like, holy cow, what a strange, bizarre series of draft events there. But we're ready to pick your brain. Thanks for cutting out some time for us. Is that combine is open this week, and we're in the interview portions right now. And like you heard in the green room that we've been discussing some of the things kind of coming out around the Carolina Panthers. But again, the storylines focus for us on offensive linemen and quarterbacks, right? Is like, this is the number one kind of, I mean, hey, until we get it fixed, it's always going to be the discussion. And it's like the lifelong discussion of being a Panthers fan. Your thoughts on the offensive line and quarterback class this year coming out?
Yeah, if I'm the Panthers, I'm focusing on fixing that offensive line this year. This is a good year for tackle, especially in the top 10. There's some really good options. Charles Cross from Mississippi State, Ikem Ekwonu from North Carolina State, and then Evan Neal from Alabama. Obviously, all three of those guys are not going to be there when the Panthers are picking. But I think the third one remaining, whoever doesn't end up getting selected, would be really good for the Panthers. But there's also some really interesting interior options. Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa, Kenyon Green from Texas A&M. You can really bolster and improve the offensive line if you are the Panthers. But the one thing I got to say is emphasize other positions instead of quarterback in this year's class. And I'm sure that anyone who's been following the Panthers in this draft class probably knows where I'm going with this, is that this quarterback group is significantly worse than anything we've seen in the past few years. I don't think any of these guys would have even been in the top 7 of last year's class, which is really saying something. Whoever's the most desperate is going to draft a quarterback, and I think the Panthers don't necessarily need to be that team. I'm not saying that Sam Darnold's the guy going forward, but instead of taking a shot on one of these players that just isn't really either ready to step in or is just too raw to really possibly turn into what he's capable of being, that's kind of what you're getting with this class. And that's like Malik Willis fits that description of really, really raw, has the traits, but he's boom or bust. He's either going to be really good or he's not going to hit. So do you really want to take that chance on another young quarterback when you just did that with Sam Darnold?
Yeah, Joe, if I may jump in here, you said something that I found interesting. By the way, fellow draft nerd here, I'm the Panthers analyst for drafttech.com. This is my type of year, a time of year rather. I love talking about the draft. Hope springs eternal for all football teams around this time of year, so it's fun. But you mentioned that you think guys like Charles Cross, and Ikem Ekwonu and Evan Neal would be gone by the time the Panthers pick at 6. Do you really think that the top 5 picks are going to be that heavy with offensive line selections? And what kind of makes you think that those guys wouldn't be there by the time Carolina picked?
Right. What I think is likely going to happen is Evan Neal and Ikem Ekwonu will both be gone, and Charles Cross will be there. I don't think all 3 will go. So for the Panthers' sake, is whoever's available out of those 3, or you can lump in Kenyon Green. I don't think it's too much of a reach to take him that high because he's very, very talented and he can be a very high impact player. But right now it kind of seems like Jacksonville might decide to go tackle, and you're seeing it pop up in these mock drafts that Ikem Ekwonu actually could be the first overall pick. I think that's a little bit aggressive for me, but people like Mel Kiper think it's a possibility. I think Evan Neal is certainly going to be really heavily in play for the Jaguars. There's not really going to be a situation where they can trade out because there's no quarterback to be selected for them to trade out. And if you look at how this team has built their roster over the past couple of drafts, they've taken defensive ends, Kayvon Chazon and Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen. So I don't think there's an incentive there for them to really go edge. They're probably going to end up going tackle, and that takes one of the guys off the board. Do the Jets decide to maybe go tackle? I think there's some really good options for some of these teams that need to fix offensive line. So whoever's that 3rd or 4th guy available of those offensive linemen that I named, if you're the Panthers, you got to take that shot because they really need to fix that group.
What do you think about the Charles Cross prospect? Is like we've looked at his film. Cody has looked at it significantly or in depth, and really like just a great pass blocker, right? I mean, it seems like that, but a lot of people are saying like, well, he's not this complete player yet because we just haven't seen a ton of film on him run blocking. Just your thoughts on him as a talent coming into the NFL.
Yeah, he's on the younger side. He's, I Bleav, a redshirt. Yeah, he's a redshirt sophomore. So he's a lot younger, and you're talking about how he's not necessarily fully complete. That's when you're going to get with a younger guy, especially these days with how underdeveloped offensive linemen are coming into the NFL. So I think Cross has the traits. He talked about how good he looks as a pass blocker, and that's what you want in the NFL. You want a good pass blocker, a base that to show that they're capable of doing that. It's easier to teach a guy how to run block than it is how to pass block, and he has those traits that you want. He's got a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a reason why he's not in contention to be that top 5 pick like Aquanu and Evan Neal are. But I think that the traits are there, and if you need a developmental tackle, he's certainly worthy of consideration there at 6.
Are all of these guys, like you talked about the quarterback class being, I guess a little inflated or, not the best that we've seen going for in the recent years. Some people, that narrative is creeping into this offensive line group, but it seems like there's so many names in this offensive line group that look really good to me. So I don't know, is that just like draft people that just have to have something to talk about? Is because right now it looks like this should be a very heavy offensive line top 10 draft, I would think.
Yeah, there are going to be a lot of linemen, I think, that go this year. And I totally understand what you're talking about, where it seems like some of these guys sound like they're a bit more developmental, some of these tackles. But the developmental side of things with these tackles is still much further along than the quarterback group. You're really taking a lot of risks with any of these players with drafting a quarterback. And I think specifically with the Panthers' most recent situation of taking that shot on Sam Darnold, if you're uncertain and you're not sold on a guy at 6, I'm not taking that chance. Wait until next year. Try and make some moves in free agency. I think that needs to be the emphasis. I mean, the Panthers have a pretty good defense. They have a defense if you can retain. I heard you guys talking about Hassan Reddick, guys like him and Stephon Gilmore. It's a pretty good young unit, and that might be a team that you can entice one of these free agents, one of these tradable quarterbacks to come to Carolina. But the only way you're going to do that is by committing to fixing this offensive line.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of switch back to the quarterbacks for a second. You mentioned Malik Willis, and you said he's a boomer bust prospect. Well, it seems like in recent years there have been a number of these kinds of prospects to come through the draft. Everybody puts up all these warning signs about them, and then they end up going into the NFL and they end up showing a tremendous amount of promise. I'm talking specifically about guys like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, and even potentially like a guy like Trey Lance last year, and what he might be able to be in the future. How do you look at the quarterback position and say, okay, we have a guy like Malik Willis. He has all the physical talent in the world. He's kind of a one-read guy. He has some inaccuracies. He had to play a lot of superhero ball and not really a whole lot of NFL talent around him. So how do you fight that urge to, potentially want to find your own Josh Allen versus looking at a guy that does need some polish and might not be ready to start right away? How do you weigh those two things against one another?
Yeah, I think there were some pretty heavy differences for Trey Lance coming out and Josh Allen coming out compared to Malik Willis. Those guys were still, I think, a little bit further along than Malik, but most importantly, their physical traits were far and away better than what Malik Willis has. Now, Malik Willis is a very special athlete. He's got a really big arm. If he decided to test, but he's not going to, he would have ran in the 4.5s. He probably would have had some really good jumps. But those guys, like Josh Allen, his arm is one of the biggest in the league. Trey Lance has the rushing ability like no other player in the NFL right now. And his impact at North Dakota State was his ability to extend plays with his legs, to throw on the run the way that he did. And I think Malik Willis has some of that. He just isn't up to that level, which is why the risk isn't as much worth it. It's not a situation where like, wow, if we really get this guy up to par, I don't think he's anywhere near Josh Allen or what Trey Lance could possibly become. Again, Willis, though, talented player. I just think that he's going to fit better in a situation like kind of like what happened with Jordan Love, where he gets drafted later and he sits behind Aaron Rodgers. And Love might not even actually end up panning out or playing, but he needed time to sit and figure stuff out. And Trey Lance might actually also be like that too. But I think top 10 earlier than that's just way too high for somebody like Willis and the risk that comes with it.
Do you think there's a desperation, though, that teams are going to reach here? Like a particular, I mean, look, the Panthers are they are legitimately desperate, right? They have been trying and failing, from cutting Cam to getting Teddy to cutting Teddy to pursuing Watson and Matt Stafford and missing on all of that. And then trying to fit, trading a lot for Sam Darnold. And now Sam Darnold's already thought of the voices right now from the front office are acting like he's not even on the team. Mm-hmm. So our team's going to reach, you think? Are Pickett and Malik Willis going in the first round?
I think that's very, very likely that's going to happen. I think we need to see how things pan out after the wave of trades and signings and
free agency.
Yeah, free agency, because that's what's going to create this desperation that you're referencing. If you look at the teams right now that are in need of a quarterback, it's not just teams that are replacing a guy that was there for a long time, like Pittsburgh or like New Orleans, where they're trying to start from scratch and maybe bring in a veteran or an already complete roster. Tampa Bay, another example. The Broncos, I feel like, have been doing that for 5 years since Peyton Manning's been gone. But there's also these teams that have guys that they're trying to start over with, or they're not unsatisfied with them, like the Browns and the Vikings. And it seems like more than ever, this is a year where so many teams need a guy to get to that next level. There's a lot of really good rosters that just don't have a quarterback. So that to me is where that desperation is going to come into play. I don't think a team is going to be so desperate to draft Malik Willis because he's such a project, but someone like Kenny Pickett, who is the steadiest man of the group, I think that there will be desperation. The most complete team that hasn't figured it out after free agency is going to take that shot. And I'm not directly comparing. This isn't a direct comparison in terms of talent, but situationally, I could kind of see what New England did with Mac Jones. A team thinks that they can replicate that with Kenny Pickett. Mac Jones was much better, though, going in the league than Kenny Pickett was. The thing that you get with Kenny Pickett, like I said, very steady. He doesn't get too high. He doesn't get too low. He's very consistent, but he's not going to – he's kind of like Kirk Cousins is a good example. We keep hearing all this talk about Kirk Cousins and how he doesn't make plays that are going to really win your team a game, but he does enough to maybe help out a good defense and keep you from losing. So if a team's willing to take that risk, I think that someone like Denver, if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, might have to be that desperate to go after Kenny Pickett.
To kind of stay on this offensive line thing, again, the Panthers have made it known to the world that we are trying to fix the quarterback position. We're trying to fix the offensive line position. So much of our questions are kind of centered around that area of focus. We talked about the top three, guys like Evan Neal and Kwanu, guys like Cross. I kind of want to move into those next tier of guys and talk about, are they guys that the Panthers should consider at 6, or is it more likely that you pick a player up, after you've traded down a little bit and recouped our second and third round picks? More specifically, the guys that I'm speaking of are guys like, for example, Tyler Linderbaum, who is a name that has gotten, a lot of hype. He's clearly the best center prospect in this draft. Do you think that 6 is too rich for a guy like Linderbaum, or is that a guy that you would like to trade back a little bit to maybe kind of pick up later?
Yeah, I think that you could realistically trade back a little bit, not like outside of the top 20 to get Linderbaum. The thing that makes things really tricky with Linderbaum is that, like you said, far and away the best center prospect in this class. All the guys that were behind him, most of them decided to go back to school. So it's him, and then there's really nobody else in that first round conversation for a while. Like, you could even say that there's nobody even second round conversation. So whoever might be the most aggressive in going after a center, it is a little bit of a risk moving back. But I think for like the Panthers, who can draft really any of these offensive linemen, I don't think you really need to be in a rush to draft a center. I would almost rather take Kenyon Green at 6 than I would take Linderbaum. The only thing with Linderbaum is that he's very scheme specific for me. Like he's a zone blocking center because he's on the smaller side. I don't think you have those limitations with Kenyon Green.
Okay.
When it comes to trading up, sorry, I was trying to get click. When it comes to trading up, everybody, all right, so all Panther fans have an opinion. Every fan base is an armchair GM at this time, including Gus sitting on this panel right here. But the words trade back are always used like it can just easily happen. But you have to have a dance partner. You got the Giants, who have 2 picks, I think, in the top 10, maybe, or the Jets do as well. There's 2 teams that have 2 picks in.
The Giants have 5 and 7. I think the Jets do as well.
So they have flexibility to move and not lose a top 10 pick. Who's a player? Is there a player in this draft that's worth trading into the 6th spot? Is there a dance partner out there who sees somebody worthy enough to jump into 6? And for all I've heard, it's been that safety from Notre Dame. But I don't even know if you would want to allocate a ton of future assets for a safety pick like that. So our team's going to be moving into the top 10, or is this kind of one of those just going to be like or do you expect this to just kind of be a vanilla draft?
I wouldn't say it's going to be a vanilla draft, but I think a lot of teams are going to be approaching it as like best available. Oh, we miss out on our guy. It's not the end of the world. There's still a lot of really good depth. There's a reason why right now there's no clear blue chip first overall pick. There's not a lot of those guys. But the thing is, Kyle Hamilton, I would argue, fits that description of blue chip first overall type pick prospect. This guy's a unicorn. He's 6'4", 220 pounds. His testing at the combine is going to be stupid. People are going to be really talking him up. But like you're saying, not a lot of people want to spend a high draft pick on a safety. And I think that if Hamilton starts to move back a little bit, and the Panthers don't want to take a safety there, I wouldn't be shocked if somebody picks up the phone and says, we can't let this kid fall any further. We want that high impact player, because that's what Kyle Hamilton is. He is a safety built like a linebacker, but is still going to play safety, can play in the box, but is best suited to play center field and roam sideline to sideline. You don't build guys like this. He's very highly talented. He's the only guy that I think I would aggressively say someone might trade up for, only if he slides. And I would be shocked if he falls outside of the top 5, because I don't think a lot of teams are going to overthink him because he's so rare.
Joe, much of the narrative around this draft is that there really isn't one have-to-have player. There's no Myles Garrett. There's no Trevor Lawrence. There isn't like a belle of the ball, so to say, in this year's draft. In your opinion, who do you have as the best prospect in the entire draft?
For me, it is Kyle Hamilton. I still stand by that. I think that there's still too much of a debate between Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson. The debate between Evan Neal and Ika Mekwonu is opening up a little bit, but Evan Neal is still in probably ahead in that conversation. But the thing with like Evan Neal is like Penei Sewell was a better prospect coming out than Evan Neal was, and he was drafted far later than Evan Neal is probably going to end up getting selected. But if you take a look at what Kyle Hamilton is as an athlete, as a prospect, we're not going to see a guy like this come out in the next 10 years. We haven't seen somebody like this come out in the previous 10 years. I think there was some hype that maybe Jamal Adams was that type of guy, but there are vast athleticism and size differences between the two of them. So Kyle Hamilton for me is the best prospect, but just because of his position, that positional value isn't there. So he'll probably slide a few picks so somebody can take a tackle, because that's always more of a priority, or somebody's going to go edge, and that's always more of a priority. But the teams that pass on Kyle Hamilton are going to regret it.
Your thoughts on linebackers like in that 3rd and 4th round, and safeties in that 3rd and 4th round, names to be looking at the combine as well as just on draft day?
Yeah, the one guy that I keep pushing very heavy on, and he's probably going to push himself into the 2nd round conversation. The name to watch at the combine this week is linebacker Leo Chenal from Wisconsin. This is a guy who was playing at 260 pounds, about 6'3". There's a video out there if anyone wants to go track it down, and it keeps getting reshared, and it's going to get reshared this week, where he was an underclassman at Wisconsin, and he puts 225 on the bar, and he rips off like 40-something reps, like it's nothing. And that's as an underclassman. So this guy's going to rip probably maybe close to 50. He might maybe break that record if it's possible, and I'm hoping that he does, because that's always exciting to see. But he's a fast player for his size. Could run in the 4.5s at 260 pounds, which is pretty crazy. He's going to jump pretty well. He is a freakish athlete, and I think people aren't talking about him enough, and he's somebody to definitely keep an eye on. But there are also some other really interesting prospects at linebacker. Christian Harris from Alabama is somebody who is just talked about because of the name on his jersey. Brian Asamoah from Oklahoma, somebody whose name that keeps getting brought up. Darren Beavers from Cincinnati. And then another guy that I'm a big fan of because of my FCS ties is Troy Anderson from Montana State. Early on in Montana State, they moved him to quarterback, and he also played some running back, and he was an All-American at those positions. They move him to linebacker, and he's an All-American at linebacker, and he's in the voting for best defensive player at the FCS level. He's a little green to the position, but athletically, he fits everything that you want at linebacker. If you can tap into that, I think that he's a really good developmental third, fourth round type of a linebacker that, for the Panthers' sake, should take that chance on. And then talking on safeties, Lewis Seen from Georgia, very hard hitting box safety, really good player. Another guy that I'm a big fan of and that I've had the chance to talk to, Verone McKinley from Oregon. He made a name for himself in that Ohio State game, and I think that his name kind of just slowed down a little bit because Oregon was struggling, but still, I think Verone McKinley is a very good safety that could be selected in the mid rounds of this draft.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned this video of
there we
Leo
go.
Oh, yeah, this is him putting up. You said it was
315. There we go.
Yeah,
I think there's another video too. There's one where he does 225, but 18 reps at 315. That's very translatable to 50 reps.
Yeah. The dude's a beast. He definitely is a beast. I look forward to looking at more of his film. Another name that continues to come up too is Chad Muma. And when you look at this guy's film as a linebacker, he looks like he looks the part. And the Panthers have been looking for that heir apparent to Luke Kuechly. Mm-hmm. Not saying that Chad Muma is that, but 6'3", 240 pounds. He seems to have fluid hips and coverage, has a nose for the football. How much do you know about Chad Muma, and why do you think potentially he isn't getting more of a buzz than, say, Christian Harris out of Alabama?
Yeah, Muma, I started to pay attention a little bit more too when I was at the Senior Bowl, and there was a little bit of buzz on his name. He's got the size. He's going to be a really good outside linebacker, I think, at the next level, and could certainly turn into a starter like his. I think he played with Luke Wilson, who was who was a linebacker at Wyoming that ended up going to the Bengals. But Muma, I think he's a very strong player, and I think one of the things that comes down to it, why someone like Christian Harris is going to get more buzz, is just the name recognition, the school recognition. We're in that point of the cycle where there's starting to be some shuffling going on once we get some testing on these players and we get to watch the film. I honestly think that Muma might be somebody at the combine that could help himself out a lot, maybe push himself ahead of some of these other players. But you hit the nail on the head there. Very underrated prospect, very, very strong linebacker that could go somewhere on day 2.
What are you excited about, looking forward to, or what are you looking forward to coming out of the combine?
I'm just excited to see the testing for a lot of these position groups, the receivers particularly. I want to see some separation amongst that top crop. I don't think Drake London's going to test, but like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, can there be some separation there? The corners especially. I think that there's a lot of questions on who is corner one. Derek Stingley's not participating, but then there's that like second crop of Kyer Elam and some of those guys. And the testing is going to help us figure out who stands above the rest. And right now, that fat clump of guys in tier 1 and tier 2 for the corners is just just sitting there. And I think we need some separation with the drills that it can provide.
Do you expect any quarterbacks to kind of climb into higher into the conversation? Who's the Cody, the Ole Miss guy everybody likes?
Yeah, Matt Corral.
Yeah, like or the guy from UNC. Do you expect, or are you looking for an opportunity for some of these guys to climb the ranks? And is Malik Willis? You said he wasn't going to test. Is he going to throw?
He said he's going to throw, and I think that if Malik just shows a little bit of consistency and doesn't try to press too much, which he tends to do, that's definitely going to help him. But this year's quarterback class, it's almost like whoever does the least is going to come out as the winner, just because the group's not very good. It's not very polished. I'm not even sure if Corral is going to be participating or not off the top of my head, because he's coming off of that ankle injury that he suffered in his bowl game. So that might come into play. They might just tell him, sit out, let the rest of these guys screw themselves over with their own mistakes. But it is that kind of year where it's like, all right, who looks the least bad out of the group is going to be the winner. I don't think that there's really going to be major flashes. The best.
Could we be making a mistake in presupposing that these guys aren't, fantastic, and that is because they're coming off of on the heels of what was described to us as the greatest quarterback class coming out of college at one time? Do you think that we are maybe, and I understand, I think I agree with your point about like the top 10 and the top 6 and nobody consensus, but could we be talking ourselves out of guys? I always have this thing that we get in these arguments. I don't like draft talk. I don't like the combine. I'm not a fan anymore because I feel like you and Cody spend a bazillion hours, and like 4% of it turns to be true, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just so much speculation. But one of the things that I tend to think of is people go, oh, I just wouldn't pick him at 6. Oh, but at 15, I would pick him. And you're like, well, I mean, I get like value and things like that. And like, you have to keep this in. But is there really a difference between a quarterback being successful if he was picked at 15 and if he was picked at 9? Or something to that effect. Could we be overthinking some of this and maybe not thinking a guy into the top 10, but could we just be too quick to dismiss these guys because nobody thought Patrick Mahomes was that great.
Well, to be fair, Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, Ben McAdoo did.
Well, in Patrick Mahomes' year, there was that speculation of like, wow, this kid could be really freaking good. He could turn into like MVP level, or we're never going to see a single snap from him. That was what Patrick Mahomes was. There's not a guy in this class that's like that. And I think that if you're talking about how like maybe we're on the heels of this last class where it was deemed historic, and like the juxtaposition of that is bad timing for this group. Like I said earlier, the best guy in this class wouldn't be within the top 5 quarterbacks of last year. That's pretty telling that this group is just far behind the talent level of the other group. I think it's just in terms of readiness, arm talent, all of those things. I just don't think there's a lot of starting quarterbacks. It's less of just jumping to judge these guys. And I'm sure that there's going to be 1 or 2 starters that come from this class. Like if you look at the Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins year, I mean, like Kyler Murray's a really good starter. There's no guy like that in this year's class. But other than that, like nobody really emerged from that group. So it's just quarterback. It's very easy to fail at, I feel like. And if you don't have it, and if you don't have the mental traits that go with evaluating a defense and knowing everything that's going on, it's just very hard to succeed at the next level.
Yeah, one of the questions that is going on in Draft Nation right now, and you kind of alluded to it also, is who's the more premier pass rusher in this year's draft? Is it Aiden Hutchinson or is it Kayvon Thibodeau? I myself am a Hutchinson guy. I think this guy is going to be a premier pass rusher in the NFL for a long time to come. I think that Thibodeau is a freak athlete, has a bunch of traits that you want, still needs a little more polish. Where did you land on that issue? If you had to bet on one for the next, 5+ years, who are you taking?
I'm going with Kayvon Thibodeau simply for the traits that he has. He is not as fully developed and doesn't have that full pass rusher toolbox developed yet, and I think it's going to take him some time to really figure that out. He did a lot of speed to power at Oregon, and he's the best athlete on the field, so he can get away with that stuff. But he can't do that in the NFL. He's got to figure that stuff out. I think that if you can hit on that 5-star recruit, first overall, best recruit in his class type of potential, he can be a very, very good pro. I think what you get with Aiden Hutchinson, who's also very good. It's like a 1A, 1B situation, but I think Hutchinson is just a little bit lower in his ceiling, but he's a lot further along because he's an older prospect.
Sure.
All right. Fantastic stuff. Joe, tell everybody listening, thank you so much for giving us all this, being so generous with your time and the insight into this. Tell our listeners how they can follow your work and monitor and keep up with you throughout this combine and draft period.
You can follow me at Joe DeLeone, and then also follow the podcast that I am a host for at NFL Prospects Pod. And we also have a YouTube channel, which is just NFL Draft Prospects Podcast on YouTube. Thanks so much, guys, for having me on. Always excited to talk draft, so appreciate you giving me the chance yet again this week.
All right, man. I hope you guys are more than 4% right this year. That goes for Cody, too. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Go, everybody, follow him and check out his work. Let's jump quickly back into the Carolina Panthers news. This is the BeatCheck, and there's some significant news. We spent a lot of time on Ian Thomas last night, but today Scott Fitterer came out and I would say defended and explained the move. He said the $8 million basically is where, like, this pay is a middle of the road tight end, right? This is like middle, the top tier being at 14. I still think this is a bit rich, but it sounds like what he called him as an inline tight end, that this is going to be important to Ben McAdoo. Like, Ben McAdoo's scheme seems to be something that's going to appreciate Ian Thomas. And we have seen, he talked about his speed, and like if he can get down the seam, he is faster. Kind of takes him a little bit longer to get from 0 to 60 than maybe some other guys. But I still think that it seems like a lot. And maybe I'm just going to rest on what I said last night, which is this is a 1-year deal, and we're going to give you some tools to try to get through it this year. And if you don't really make a splash, then we'll be parting ways. Your thoughts on Scott Fitterer's talk about Ian Thomas?
Yeah, so I mean, listen, the one part, if there's going to be any part of me that's in any way an optimist at all, it's when he mentioned Ben McAdoo and how the system that he favors is going to be a little more forgiving to the tight end position. So basically, you're kind of hoping that Ian Thomas ends up showing you some production that, whether it be through scheme or whatever, he just hasn't been able to show us thus far in his career. From everything that we're hearing, the Panthers want to be an aggressive, run-dominant football team that's built tough in the trenches. And, to me, this says it speaks very favorable for a guy like Deontay Brown that we've been, talking about for a whole year when the man barely ever played. It seems like Deontay Brown would fit good into that equation. It seems like they just want to be an aggressive run-first offensive line, and that Ian Thomas contract is an extension of how they believe he fits into that and how he's going to continue to grow as a part of that offense. I think all of our opinions is probably going to be it's a little bit too rich until he proves to be worth that kind of contract. But to me, this says a lot about McAdoo.
Again, I mean, I find it kind of bizarre that a guy that is being brought in at the last second on a sinking ship is going to have kind of that much input on personnel decisions. But it's funny that he gets more input than Matt Rule at that, or at least now. Yeah, but the real, I guess, the talk has moved on now to it doesn't look like the Panthers are going to be bringing back Hassan Reddick. Some people are saying he wanted over $20 million was the asking price. I mean, wanting to be paid like a defensive end rather than a linebacker in many ways. I understand the disappointment in letting the most productive player on your defense go. I do Bleav that, like, just saying that this defense is going to be good. I don't think they were all that great last year, despite the statistics saying that they were. I mean, they were okay, but they didn't make stops at the right time. And they have talked a lot about getting bigger on the edges. You got a little bit more time with Brian Burns. You're going to pick up his 5th-year option. I think he is going into his 4th season now. Is that right? Or is he going into his 5th?
Brian Burns.
No, yeah. He's got to be in his 4th. It would be 2018. Yep. He was drafted 18, 19, 20, 21. Oh, so maybe he is going into his 5th. Nah, that can't be right.
I'll pull it up.
So, I understand this, and I also understand that Hassan Reddick's one of those players that is going to be so scheme dependent. It's kind of hard to sink a lot of money into him, I think, and it kind of sucks for him. Is that he is a premier pass rusher, but at the same time, he's light and ass, which then gives you problems in stopping the run. And having 2 defensive ends that have those traits could be problematic.
4th year, he was drafted 2019.
Okay, yeah, so they have to pick up his 5th-year option. But Brian Burns is going to be significantly cheaper than that. And you don't really know where this team is going to be going in the future. I think I can understand this move. So any thoughts on Scott Fitterer's position when it comes to Hassan Reddick?
I mean, listen, apparently he went on WFNZ after and did an interview. I didn't get a chance to hear that interview, but all the talk is that he wanted, between 17 to 20 million dollars, and that would effectively be the rest of the Panthers cap space. So just financially, it wasn't feasible. And I get that, but I mean, Tony, let's be real. Now, I think the real fear is that our defense is going to see a noted step back if we're not going to be able to retain some of these defensive stalwarts. Now it's looking like Stephon Gilmore might not be able to sign as well. He put out some cryptic tweets earlier this morning that, has Panther fans talking. And those have been 2 of the bigger names that we've been talking about wanting to come back to this football team this year. So now that they aren't coming back, I mean, you either have to hope that Frankie Louvu is able to fill in that spot for Hassan Reddick, or that somebody like even your Turgos Matos,
I think that's where you're thinking,
is able to step up in a big way like that he frankly hasn't before.
And we don't need to rule out Morgan Fox either.
Yeah, Morgan Fox is a good player. I guess my only trepidation is that if you look at what Hassan Reddick has done in the past 2 years, he's clearly playing his best football right now. And it's hard to see all that sack production just walk out the door when, we have guys that we might be hopeful about, like YGM and Morgan Fox, but there certainly isn't an assured answer to give you that same kind of production.
I think just at the end of the problem being is, or this suggests that they're not interested in getting rid of Brian Burns in a trade or anything like that. That's what that first is suggesting to me. But this kind of just goes back to having complementary players for me. And, you need a speed guy and a big guy on the outside. You need size, speed. You need all these. And I'm not talking defensive end as much as like in a wide receiver. These players need to complement each other. And yes, you need to be able to rush the passer, but a speed rush alone, if you only have a speed rush from the edges, you can find ways to mitigate that. And if you had maybe a more powerful guy on the other side, and then Hassan Reddick was your speed rusher, but let's just not call him a linebacker, man. Like he rushes the passer every time. I mean, every single time it feels like. So I just feel like I understand it. Do I like it? Not necessarily. Do I like, because I thought that we got a great deal in an $8 million player for Hassan Reddick last year. Like, we got a steal for that. I'm a little surprised they're not considered tagging him.
Yeah. I mean, I even think maybe just a franchise tag would be too rich for them. If what was it, like 15 something million?
16, yeah, 16. But
Yeah, so
still,
I
I mean,
mean,
you
you're
just
still
gave damn
talking a
Ian
lot
Thomas
of
8.
money. Yeah, man. And see, this is what I'm talking about too. It's like, that money I would have preferred going to Hassan Reddick over Ian Thomas. And then you always talk about drafting tight ends that you can do it in the 3rd and 4th round, and you can get these really good football players. It's just, if I had to pick between who I'd rather lose, Hassan Reddick and Ian Thomas, obviously
Oh
I'm
yeah,
picking
man,
Ian
it's not even
Thomas.
close.
I mean,
Not even close.
it's not even close. But
Let's
yeah,
go to the quarterback discussion real quick, though. Unlike
yeah,
our guest, it seems like our front office is more interested in quarterbacks than the draft scouts are.
yeah.
Maybe, do you think? I mean, look, is Scott Fitter blowing smoke at this point? Is this all
How
really the
so?
Panthers trying to do something in free agency?
Well,
Trade, do this. Like, I feel like, look, he was asked today, how many of these quarterbacks do you see as a top 10 type of pick? And he said, well, I'm not going to give away my grades. That would be, foolish to tell you guys too much, even though they tell us everything. I don't know. He said there were some good players at quarterback. He said that this isn't like the best class overall, but there's some good players here. A lot of people have
yeah.
continued to link us to Pickett. I don't know. I almost feel like this is that he was talking so much about having the elite quarterback. He said,
Yeah.
he said, I would just sleep better. I just think it's crazy how quick they have acted like Sam Darnold ain't on the team.
So, Tony, what I'm getting from this entire quarterback conversation is that the Panthers don't feel like they need an elite quarterback, which is part of the reason why all of these rumors about, Kirk Cousins and Jimmy Garoppolo, as much as I may not like them, I have no doubt in my mind that they're very real rumors. And I wanted to share this clip from something that Fitterer said today during his press conference, and I took a lot out of this.
But it's definitely nice when you have one. You definitely sleep better.
Talking about elite quarterbacks, he was asked about elite quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like okay.
Yep.
It's definitely nice when you have one. You definitely sleep better at night.
It doesn't mean like your team can
Yeah,
be terrible.
I mean, it's not like you can't win a Super Bowl with a good starting quarterback. You don't need to have the elite guy, and I think you've seen that kind of over time. But you need to be able to surround them with players that can compensate for maybe some of their weaknesses, maybe some receivers or running back or an offensive line where you can protect them more. So I think it's great to have stars and like these elite quarterbacks. They're fun to watch, but I think there's ways you can go about maybe if you don't have one compensating for that. It is harder.
I didn't take that as
that number one guy. I'd love to have that, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah,
I think that he's saying I don't take that as I think he's saying inadvertently you really do need an elite guy. He's saying it's possible to win without an elite guy, but it ain't easy. And it's not easy to win, period. I think that is just saying this. If we don't get our quarterback in a trade, free agency, or a guy that we think is super elite in this draft, we don't think that we don't have a chance of winning, and we're like phoning it in until that moment.
Yeah,
but I still think this is like, man, until we get until we get that Matt Stafford in this building, we're gonna have problems. That's what I feel.
I mean, really, I mean, look, I kind of take this to mean two different ways, right? I really do think that they still want to land Deshaun Watson if they're able to. I think that's what David Tepper wants. And I think that's part of the reason why you continuously hear our names connected to Deshaun Watson. Now, let's get over whether or not that's actually possible at all. I think this is Fitterer saying that the Carolina Panthers, if they don't get a player like Deshaun, which I don't think even they believe that that's going to happen, they probably believe that it's far more likely that you take one of these game manager style quarterbacks and build around. You shake your head, Tony. I really do. If you look at every move that the Panthers have made thus far at the quarterback position, it only speaks to that more truly. You look at Teddy Bridgewater, who has no real special traits. Sam Darnold was never truly able to prove anything with his time at the Jets. And you know, you hear these rumors about Kirk Cousins and, you know, Jimmy Garoppolo. I really do think if you look what the Panthers wanted to do last year, they wanted to bring in Matthew Stafford,
who is considered elite.
But they wanted to build around him and give him enough talent that way he wouldn't be forced to do everything. And I think that the Panthers are more than willing to try their shot at a quarterback that more likely fits that kind of mold. And to continue on that, I think that puts Kenny Pickett more into the equation here. You know, once upon a time, you said, Tony, that Kenny Pickett was like a white Teddy Bridgewater to you. Well, if that's true, and you add that on top of the fact that David Tepper is a huge booster for the Pittsburgh Panthers, Matt Rule once upon a time gave him a scholarship to come play at Temple. Like, all of the connections are there. And I can just see the Carolina Panthers falling head over heels with a guy who they think will be just enough.
I just don't want to connect too much of the past legacy and Matt Rule to Scott Fitterer in this case. So because we did that with Teddy Bridgewater, I don't think that should be a referendum on Scott Fitterer's position on the quarterback, because he immediately was going after and courting Deshaun Watson and then Matt Stafford. That's different. And then they overplayed their hand at that time and then had already basically parted ties with Teddy Bridgewater unofficially at that point. So then they went and had to they got backed into a corner for Sam Darnold. But if I don't know. I just feel like until they get their guy, I am worried that the Panthers are going to pick a quarterback out of desperation, not because they really think it's the right move.
Yeah, and also I wanted to mention this to you as well. And shout out to our guest, Leo. He was a great guest. He had a lot of really good information. But if you notice how certain Leo sounded about most of the things he was saying, like just flat out, there are no real good franchise quarterbacks in this draft that aren't a project. It's just such an inferior class. Well, it kind of shines a light into how players can get passed up on. So if you have it set in your mind, for example, last year, that a guy like Rashawn Slater, yeah, you know, he's really good. He played good in college, but that probably won't pan out to the NFL. He might need to kick inside, play guard. You kind of get caught in this trap of making these predetermined notions about these players or even a draft class as a whole, and now you judge it unfairly. It's like what I'm saying. A lot of guys, they're not truly doing a proper evaluation. They're taking some of these blanket evaluations and just stamping them onto players. But I think you have to look at it from a perspective of, do a lot of these teams have the support structure to be able to make a player successful? And if you look at a guy like Malik Willis, you know, if you gave him some tight ends, you have Christian McCaffrey, you have a guy like DJ Moore, it wouldn't surprise me if Malik Willis goes and throws well at the combine, and if he has a good pro day as well, that, you know, the Panthers might continue to fall in love with what Malik Willis might be down the road. And I don't know that would be a wrong assessment.
He, you know, if he turns out to be a starter and he's picked in the third, it's going to be great. If he turns out to be a starter and he's picked in the first, he deserved to be picked in the first. You know, and that's where I think we get too enamored with the grades, like in this value game, the Moneyball game. And it kind of, like you said, colors our lens that we look through. I think some of this is how hyper-focused draft, because of the internet now, because we're able to live broadcast and podcast every night, ultimately for free, in so many voices, that there's such a magnifying glass on the draft now right?
Yeah.
That I won't say you're overthinking it, but like they said the same crap about Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
You know, is that so I do get this, is that like, hey, he's not tall. So Trey Lance had the arm, the mobility, the off
height,
platform, the height,
build,
like
everything.
he's designed, right? By design, a quarterback. So here's the thing is you don't have a quarterback in this class that has
polished. traits on traits.
Right. And that doesn't mean that they're going. And so I do get what they're saying, right? Is like
you have to do a little projecting.
You know, and you might have to do some gambling. And I think now this is the year that you draft your quarterback in the 3rd round, maybe. I don't like the idea that Mac Jones was head and shoulders above Kenny Pickett.
I don't either. And in fact, not only do I disagree with that, I've been hearing that notion that Pickett is like a poor man's Mac Jones. And I disagree. I think Mac Jones had the benefit of being on a far superior football team. I don't know if Mac Jones has 42 touchdowns and 7 interceptions playing with Pitt. I really just don't. I like his off-platform ability far more than I did Mac Jones.
He's more mobile than Mac Jones is.
Yeah.
You know, I think the problem with Mac Jones for me, I was just underwhelmed by Mac Jones, period. Now, I'm not saying that he can't be good. And he's not, but I feel like he is going to be like, needs to be in a better situation than others. Like, I don't think, he's not like Kyler Murray.
Yeah. You're already seeing his ceiling.
Yeah, maybe, you know, and so I don't know. I don't want to preclude him from being good in the future. But I think if I was going to I would kind of say that, I can understand Malik Willis being a project coming from a small school and you don't got a lot of tape on throwing the ball, right? Like you just don't have a ton of film when it comes to throwing the ball. But I think that like Mac Jones is in that 2nd tier of quarterbacks from last year. He kind of just was riding the coattails almost. In the fact that San Francisco picked Trey Lance over him. And they had that whole discussion about it. So, your thoughts on that real quick. Hold on, I gotta sign my kids' homework.
No, you're fine. I mean, listen, you know, it's like you said that, you know, Russell Wilson, you know, they would have said the same thing about him and him being kind of drafted later. You know, I don't know, man. I really, you know, the quarterback thing is interesting, especially when you think about Matt Rule and the position that he's in too. Because you know, and you've said this before too. It's like almost a de facto way to try and extend his own tenure here is to draft a quarterback, and you know, and try and make this thing go again, and say, okay, well, we just need some more time to build this. Again, you know, we're talking about Mac Jones here, and I think if you look at what Mac Jones did at Alabama. And what Matt Jones did with the Patriots, you've seen what kind of player he is. And that's, you know, you're going to build your team in a certain way to make him successful. I look at the guys in this draft class, specifically Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis, and even though they're different and you would have to build your offense different ways, I think that if you built around those guys in the same way, they could also have a really good level of success that, you know, maybe people aren't expecting of them because they don't have the elite measurables like a Trey Lance or a Trevor Lawrence before them. So it's going to be
Kenny
tough.
Pickett turns into a more mobile Tom Brady, you know, at times is like I would think, or I would say this is that I don't see a big talent disparity between Pickett. I can't comment on Malik Willis enough, all because like really he's played in a lower class of football. There's less time to see him, and it was so kind of a simplified offense, you know, that almost like a high school offense in a way is like, hey, we're going to have our best athlete play quarterback and he can run, throw, and he's going to be the guy that does like 90% of the stuff goes through him. That's what it felt like. Now, I've only watched the tape with you, so I don't know any more about him other than that.
Yep.
I do know this guy interviews like crazy good. He has so much personality. He seems so level-headed. He owns the show, and I was saying this at the Senior Bowl when I saw him speak, and today Joe Person came out, or yesterday said it killed the interviews. So I think that that's cool to see, is that this idea of polish or whatever, like and sometimes you've said in the past that these athletes, not you, but like we've said, is like, hey, they're so athlete, and they're not the way he presents himself, he seems like he could be like the leader of a team, right? Is that so? It seems like the mental is there, the confidence, the humble, like all of the things seem to be there off on in the interview, and I think that that's important.
Very.
It's probably harder to teach that in some cases than it is to teach a guy a playbook. But the other thing is I don't see. So I'm going to just stick with Pickett, and because I do think Malik Willis, you have to project forward so much on some things. I don't see Kenny Pickett in a different class than a guy like Baker Mayfield. Like I feel like he's he didn't make a Heisman. He didn't win the Heisman, right? I mean, but he also didn't play in Oklahoma or whatever.
He was a Heisman runner-up. He was a part of the. I mean, he was invited to the ceremony. He was there. He was in contention to win it.
So I also don't think that I have not been a Baker Mayfield fan. I actually like Baker more now than when he came in. I think he faced a lot of adversity, a lot of doubt, and there needs to be some credit given to him for what the Browns, how competitive they've been since he's been there. Right. Like, I mean, that is not just, I mean, and he did have a rough ending last year, but played with a lot of shoulder injuries and some things like that. But like, I mean, Jimmy G, I'm like, I mean, I don't feel like, I mean, like I'm sitting here, I'm picking Kenny Pickett over Jimmy G, like coming out of college.
Same.
And today, so I just, trying to think, Tannehill, Daniel Jones. They picked Daniel Jones at 6.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To me, they're very comparable to. And by the way, like going back to Malik Willis, though, you're talking about how good he is in the interviews, right? Part of the reason why I was so confounded by people doubting Justin Herbert was a 4.0 biology major. It matters when you're smart. Okay, because when you are really smart and you are really intelligent, it means that you're more likely to pick up new systems and new things. And if you're a hard, dedicated worker and you continue to practice those new things, a lot of these guys can pick up things faster than you might anticipate. And
or not be as overwhelmed. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, it's not even picking things up. It's just like, oh man, not only am I going to practice, not only do I got money, not only like it's just so.
Yes.
I think your growth could happen faster. So I think the fact that he is between the ears seems to be a top level person. Right. Yeah. And I didn't think he wasn't going to be. So I don't want this to be like preclude because, you don't want to have any. We have secret ways of being racist when we talk about quarterbacks and we talk about his athleticism. I have been like, I think right now what he's shown more than anything is like, gosh, this guy's got it together. He's polished in presentation. So people say he's unpolished on the football field. Well, dang.
Yeah. And
let me work with that.
Yeah. And every year, people on Twitter or in our chat room, whatever, they'll drag me over hot coals for thinking that one guy is really good. They think that I'm overrating him or whatever. And I'm telling you, so much of what's lost in this evaluation process amongst NFL teams is having a little imagination as to what he can be if he checks the boxes on all these other traits. So I know he has an arm. I know he's really powerful. He's very mobile. And if he has that willingness and tenacity to learn, yeah, I'd be more willing to take a flyer on a player like that and see if, you put him on an offense with some really good wideouts and Christian McCaffrey, and you've made an effort to build your offensive lineup, that might not be a bad pick for us. Again, it's hard to know that the Panthers. I almost guarantee you the Panthers wouldn't pick Malik Willis at 6 because they could have had Justin Fields last year, who on film had all of those things that you're not seeing from Malik Willis on film, had the talent around him, played the big time competition, and still succeeded. And the Panthers felt like Sam Darnold was a better option. So I don't know.
But still, it just stinks that we were in that conversation of getting a quarterback last year, and whether Fields works out or not. I mean, all of these guys are prospects until they're not. I mean, like there's a degree of uncertainty with every single one of these players, whether it comes from the offensive tackles to, right? It's like just because we need to see them do it in the NFL. But there was you were kind of in the sweet spot last year with a Sam Darnold without having to rush a player in. And you got to wonder maybe if they're kicking themselves in the butt a little bit for not having the guts to make the pick. And is that going to force them, are they going to react this year oppositely? So,
by the way, I love this comment from Off Grid because it's so true. Everything that we discuss that has valid points is pointless because this regime does not think like us and will not operate like we would. Ain't that the truth now?
Well, actually, we need to finish with that because there is, I think, some low-key smoke or whatever you would call shade. That's what I meant. Some low-key shade being thrown by Scott Fitterer at Matt Rule. Asked about Brady Christensen today.
Yeah.
And you were leading the charge on this before everybody. But it's man, what happens when you get a new offensive line coach in and he says, I just would have liked to see more of him play left tackle. That's the whole freaking point. Were we not screaming that we didn't think it wasn't that he was going to be day one ready to be the best left tackle in the history of the world? But at the end of the year, when the wheels are coming off of this damn bus, why are you not trying to figure out what you have with who you have? And and now this Camp guy who's been in the league forever says, I would like to just see more of him at left tackle so we could kind of gauge where we should go in the future. Crazy, man. And I think that is, I wonder if Brady Christensen was a Scott Fitterer guy pick.
Oh, yeah. And
Matt Rule didn't love it and has been taking it out on Brady Christensen because of the problems.
Yeah, and Tony, I'm 100% in agreement with that. And you and I have talked on here before about this perceived rift between Matt Rule and Fitterer because of it. Like, it's very easy for me in my mind to foresee a scenario where Fitterer was even, campaigning to get Matt Rule to give Christensen some more time at left tackle. And ultimately, it didn't happen. And then this came out today. Scott Fitterer suggests new O-line coach James Campen sounds optimistic about Brady Christensen's future, adding that Campen said, I wish we would have seen more of him at left tackle. And to which I responded, didn't we all, James? Didn't we all? I mean, this is something that we've been wanting to see for a long time. We wanted Brady to get a true shot to show that he plays left tackle. And if he had done that, we would be far more certain about the left tackle position for the Carolina Panthers now than we are going into this draft. So, for example, do we need to take a left tackle at 6? Because, and we talked about this a little bit last night, Tony. I'm not very convinced that Brady Christensen is going to be a good guard in the NFL. Matt Rule is, and Scott Fitterer, they're convinced up and down that he has enough position versatility to play center and guard and left tackle. But it's like, yeah, maybe. But at the same time, let's not try and fit a square peg into a round hole. If Brady Christensen shows the kind of athletic talent and ability to be able to hold up on the outside, he should have had all last year as his audition for that job. Now we're in the
or at
position
least the
where-
back end of the year when
Sure.
when Cam Irvin was hurt, or
right
at the
and they
times
were-
that Cam Irvin was hurt, and when you were putting Trent Scott, guys that are not going to be on this team anymore.
right
That's the most bizarre. And again, I think that we saw last year with Matt Rule where he's going to have to learn, and it might be a little too late for him to learn it in Carolina, but he's been bringing in all these pro guys to help him. Is you got to know at what point in the season you're at and what your real odds are and what you're working with. And what I mean by that is, like, yeah, I mean, were you technically in the playoff hunt? Kinda. But were you going to make the playoffs with Trent Scott at left tackle? No. And if you did, you would get bounced out like the damn Eagles, right? As quick as you came, as you walked in the door, you'd be out the door. So you should be evaluating. This is time where you get real NFL tape.
Yeah.
And don't tell me you evaluate in practice, because they don't really have open competitions. They say there's a competition. There ain't no damn competition. Like that, you got like 3 times to try it. Like in training camp, they all run the route one time and then they move on. So it's not like, I mean, they have a group of people in mind that are going to be their starters.
And that's who they roll with.
And yeah, and there might be some changes on the edges a little bit occasionally, but you know, we haven't seen that in Carolina. I do think another example here, shade coming. I think there is a I don't think Fitterer believes in Matt Rule that much at all right now. They asked about Terrace Marshall Jr.
Him, huh?
No, yeah, not at all. They asked about Terrace Marshall Jr. and they said that he just said his production wasn't what we had hoped it for. And I was like, well, I mean, there's a reason his production wasn't what I hoped for, because you didn't do anything to try to get him in the game.
He
Like, I
even said
mean,
something similar with Ian Thomas too. He's like, well, you know, he hadn't necessarily been able to show it due to issues with the offense. Like, yeah, no shit, there's a lot of issues with the offense. But yeah, it's a very similar thing too. He even mentioned Shi Smith in that equation as well, and they want to get him more involved in special teams. Again, Tony, I've said this a long time. I've been saying this going back to even Curtis Samuel, that there are just elements of our football team, specifically the receiver and tight end positions, that have just been cursed due to how bad this offensive line and quarterback positions have been. So it's like, we're hoping that if you do manage to at least get average on the offensive line, get average at the quarterback position, that now you're finally providing a scenario for guys like Terrace Marshall Jr. and Shi Smith and potentially even Ian Thomas to actually be successful and look like the players that we wanted them to be.
You're listening to the C3 Beat Check. We're going to probably call it here, I think. I want to remind everybody we're here live Tuesday nights. Friday nights, you get the Friday free-for-all. We're probably going to go do some film room stuff over tonight and tomorrow into this week and get ready for the Combine. You can watch the C3 channel for news and updates surrounding the Combine. I want to, again, encourage everybody until the draft, throughout the draft in this period coming up, we're going to be giving away a bunch of Cam Wows and some swag. So the way that you can be eligible, and I'll just select people based on kind of, you know, timing and randomness at all this. But if you go onto YouTube, if you're on your phone or on the YouTube app, beside the share button on a video that is passed, now it can't be alive as we're live recording, so you might have to wait a day and go back, but you can go and clip sections from our show last night. I did some of this and shared them on Twitter today, but it lets you clip a 60-second part of the show, and then you can share that link. Now, when you share that link, it links back to the original YouTube page. So it's a way for us to not only build subscribers, to get our name out there and to get our opinions out there and to people that you know, not just the people that already know us. So go and clip your favorite parts of your show, the worst parts of the show. Make fun of Tony. That's easy to do all the time. Clip your own call and share it. Tag me in it. Send, or at least link me somehow so I know it's out there. You can even just put hashtag C3 Panthers pod, something like that. But yeah, let me know, and I'll be giving out some cool stuff over the next couple of weeks. I'm already going to be sending Dexter. Bleav I'm terrible. I should be Mr. Henderson, I Bleav, and UK is one of the first people that he shared this on his own YouTube page. But what I want you guys to really try to do is use that link function that YouTube is innately doing, because then it comes back to our channel. The views continue to pile up, and it's a way for us to try to build some subscriber and build some additional listeners to the podcast. Cody, tell them where they can get after you in this, draft period, because they don't want to listen to old curmudgeon-y cynic Tony. They need to be listening to optimistic Cody Lashney.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Cody Lack, CODYLAC. We're going to be jumping into these film rooms more. They're coming, I promise. We're going to be looking at more of these offensive linemen. We're going to look at, I want to look at some of these defensive players too, because even though we might not be drafting them, I want to be able to point out some of the good players and be able to point back to them and say, yeah, I told you so when. So we'll be doing some more of those. As I said, you can find all my written content for the Panthers at drafttech.com. And every Wednesday, you can come on the show and be a part of it yourself on the Friday free-for-all. Yeah, Friday free-for-all for every Friday at 7 p.m. It's a great time. People come on the show, hang out, talk about Panthers. I know this week we'll probably be talking about the combine and clips from the combine and things of that nature. So tune in, have fun, join the show. It'll be a jolly good time.
All right, let's go ahead and get out of here. Till Friday, keep pounding.